All right, so I think we are good to get started this morning. So welcome everybody to our last day of Children's Week at the Legislature. It's been quite a ride, and we've learned a lot this week, and so and happy that so many of you have been with us all week and to make sure that children and families continue to have a voice even during this pandemic. So we're going to kick off today with our video from our Strong Start Children's Cabinet. So I'm going to turn it over to Annette to explain a little what that is and to introduce our cabinet member.
Thank you, Amanda. And I just want to echo it being the last day. I'm a little melancholy, actually. As Senator Neal talked about, the synergy here has been beautiful between J.K. Bells, the Children's Advocacy Alliance, NICRP, and all the community partners that are on here joining us every day. It's just been a beautiful thing to watch and just makes me grateful and proud to be a Nevadan and very hopeful for the future. So thank you all for joining us. And today is kind of an interesting day. It's economic well-being. And we chose Maya Hernandez for this day. She chose as her title to be the Director of Wildlife Conservation, and she has challenged us all to get outdoors. And I thought that's a little tricky today because at least in the South it's raining and probably in the North it's snowing, but it's a great tribute to her choice of interests, and we are connecting her with different wildlife conservation places in Nevada as well as outdoors Nevada. And I was thinking about our great state and how much it has to offer and how that is part of our economic well-being, is using those resources and the beauty that our state has while also being mindful of conservation and protection of wildlife and plants and animals. So we'll go ahead and listen to Maya's speech.
Hello everyone, my name is Maya Hernandez and I am the Director of Wildlife Conservation through the Nevada Start Strong program. I am an advocate for Nevada's wildlife and believe everyone deserves the opportunity to learn more about wildlife conservation. Wildlife conservation is important to me because I've always loved nature. I've always admired it and I've always appreciated it. Sometimes I feel like maybe we don't appreciate it enough. There's a lot of things that wouldn't be here today without nature, plants, or even animals. I challenge you this week to get outdoors and support organizations to preserve wildlife and habitats in our state. Have a good day.
Okay, let's see. Kelly, you're on here, right? Kelly, do you want to introduce Marietta's video?
I do, and actually Marietta would like to give her speech live this morning.
Great, so good to see you.
Say good morning.
Good morning.
All right, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're ready, let me make sure that I can hear you. Okay.
Hi, my name's Marietta. 6 years old and I live in Las Vegas with my mom, dad, and baby sister Miriam. Today's the last day of Children's Week. I hope you start thinking about everything that was talked about. Some kids don't have a safe place to live, and that makes me sad. Foster parents change kids' lives. Have you ever thought about fostering a kid? Maybe you could try it. Kids need a safe place to get their energy out and play, and have healthy food. Nobody should be laying on their couch watching TV all day, like my dad during the football seasons. Hey, are you looking at your phone? This is important. Even if you don't like kids, you were once a kid, so remember us kids when you vote. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you for joining us this morning.
What a rock star. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Well, what a great way to definitely open the morning. And I can say that's one of the things we definitely miss about having kids and families in the building is being able to watch our youngest advocate for themselves and for each other, and for the legislators to get to see that experience. So we're very excited to have your participation today. All right, so now we will, it just doesn't feel like that's such a high point of the day. Like, all right, so we're gonna talk about some bills this morning. Today is a little bit of a light day as they've been canceling the afternoon sessions to try to make sure that they're getting all of their bills out. So there's committee meetings this morning, and then the floor sessions, and then they don't have anything in the afternoon. So here are some of the bill hearings that are going on today, and I wanted to start with this because again, they're happening right now. So if you need to leave us to go see any of these, or if you want to testify or any of the bills that we're not mentioning, then you should do that right now. So these are for the Committee on Judiciary this morning. So AB 33 authorizes the establishment of paternity and proceedings concerning the protection of children. And again, for some of these, I don't have a lot of information on, so I just wanted to share, what I do have, but I welcome anybody else who can jump in. For AB 64, it increases penalties for sex crime or for crimes. And one of the crimes included in this is related to sex trafficking. Although when I looked at the bill, to be honest, I thought the penalties would be a little steeper than they were, but still a move in the right direction, I think. Then we have AB 115. This revises provisions relating to parentage. So I think this is a pretty exciting bill. So this authorizes the court to determine that a child can have more than two parents. And this is a great move for inclusion, I think. And so that one is being heard this morning. And then AB 224 is the access to feminine hygiene products in certain public schools, which was brought up, I believe yesterday, talking about make sure that really that students are not missing school because they don't have access to feminine hygiene products, and so are not attending school for that. So those are some of the bills that are being heard this morning. Did anybody else have any that were on their radar that they wanted to mention?
Amanda, I just have a question.
Yes.
James from Nevada Casa. When they say certain public schools, can you expand on that? Can anybody expand what that means? I'm assuming maybe middle school and high school, but what do they mean certain?
And I know that Leanne was watching this, but she went to the hearing on it. I don't have more information on that bill. I don't know if anybody else does.
Hey, Amanda, it's Shar.
Sure.
So I'm reading it right now, and they want them to be provided at no cost to pupils in the bathrooms of each middle school, junior high school, and high school in the school district or charter school operating as such a school. So if it'll include charter schools that also have the grades 6 through 12. Because not all charter schools have that.
And it's free of charge, you said?
Yeah, it's at no cost to the student.
Yay!
So, and I'm looking at fiscal notes. There's no fiscal notes on it, so.
Oh,
probably
that's interesting.
It may be an unfunded mandate at some point.
So that reminds us about all these bills that pass and then we have to follow up on, right? To make sure that they actually happen.
That's the hard part. That's why legislators like Senator Neal are so incredible, because we are a citizens legislature and they all have to go back to their regular lives and their regular jobs. And sometimes it's hard to follow up on all the things, all the good work that was done during these sessions. So it takes advocates to follow up on that.
Absolutely. So now I'm just going to highlight some of the bills that have to do with economic well-being and other issues. Again, these are ones, to be completely honest, I have not been following as closely, so I welcome any participation from the audience that can help elucidate on any of these bills. So I also wanted to make sure, so one of the themes for our week and just for our work in advocacy in general is to make sure that we're thinking about diversity and inclusion in everything that we do. So I also wanted to bring up some of these bills that I think push us forward a little bit, and these may not be comprehensive as well. I'm sure there might be more bills in this. So again, if anyone has additional information, we'd love to get them on the list. So Senate Bill 108, this is requiring certain trainings on implicit bias and cultural competency from employees of the state. This is one of those two that, you know, we need to follow up on and make sure that it's implemented, because we know you can offer training, but without enforcing that culture on a day-to-day basis, then the training, you know, is just a start for that work. And then we have, this doesn't have a bill number yet, but one of our partners wanted to make sure we were aware that there's another bill requiring cultural competency continuing education for certain mental health professionals. So obviously once we have language, we can have that again, but that's the BDR number, and it's sponsored by Assemblywoman Torres. And then we have SB 199, and this one is strengthening the acts against discrimination. And again, I don't know a lot of more information about that, so I'm not sure if anybody else does and they want to talk a little bit about that. And then I have the hygiene products again on that side. Okay. So those are those bills. And then for these next set, these are a lot of these have to do with our housing and employment. And again, there are more bills in this that we have on our tracker, but I just pulled out a couple of them. So for this first one, again, it's talking about making sure that we're not discriminating in the workforce. And the SB 12 is looking at affordable housing. So there's a couple of bills on evictions and affordable housing, especially looking at the moratoriums that are set to end by the governor. And we want to make sure that that we don't have a slew of people that are going to be kicked out, and because they're not able to recover from not being able to afford their rent. So a couple of the bills are related to that. And then on the last bill, AB 197, we have a bill regarding homeless youth, requiring health care to a minor without the consent of their parent. Because again, if they're for some youth, if they're homeless and they're on their own, they may not have access to that. We want to make sure that they get care. So those are some of the bills that I pulled out. But again, I wanted to see if anybody has either additional information and wanted to comment on any of these, or have other bills that they wanted to discuss.
Do we have Jeanette still on the call?
I am here.
Isn't there one that, and maybe we discussed this already, so I'm sorry if my ADD has me all over the place, but isn't there one about paid leave?
Yeah, that bill was just introduced yesterday, so let me pull that up.
I think that could be critical or helpful to the discussion around economic well-being for children, because I think it allows for paid leave for care and some other things as a part of that whole discussion around family-friendly employment policy.
Yeah, so that was, let's see, 209. Let me make sure whether this is an AB bill or an SB bill. That is SB 209, and that specifies requirements for an employer in private employment on how paid leave can be used. So it specifies in statute, including without limitation, treatment of mental or physical illness, injury, or health conditions. 2, receiving a medical diagnosis or medical care. 3, receiving or participating in preventive care. 4, receiving a vaccination, including without limitation a vaccination for COVID-19. 5, participating in caregiving, or 6, addressing other personal needs related to the health of the employee. So those would be added into statute with regard to the uses for paid leave.
As I hear those, particularly during this time that we're in with this pandemic, the fact that it's a push to define paid leave as including things like treatment, receiving care, or your diagnosis and vaccinations, I would hope that folks would consider being supportive of something like that. Any thoughts about that? Amanda, any thoughts about that? Or maybe we should formally support or track or encourage others to at least look into it and weigh in. Others, thoughts?
I just want to mention that that bill was just introduced yesterday. Bills are starting to be heard relatively quickly because the next deadline after the 22nd, when all the committee bills will be heard, is April 9th, which is when all bills have to be out of their first committee unless they've been exempted for some reason. So I just wanted to mention that, you know, things are going to get really busy and bills like this are going to get heard potentially on very long agendas. So it hasn't been scheduled yet, but I know all the legislators are anxious to get their bills scheduled so they meet that deadline.
Sorry, I was just trying to see if it was on our tracker, because when it dropped yesterday, we just may not have, I haven't updated yet, but I wanted to make sure it's on there so we can get notifications.
Perfect. I would encourage us to follow it, particularly since we've been pushing for healthcare coverage expansions and other things, and recognizing the economic impact on families when they have to take off unpaid to address their family's health needs. I think this is something that others should consider exploring and supporting possibly.
Yes, so I did confirm it is on our tracker, so we probably just didn't have it since it was just introduced yesterday, and we updated it yesterday morning. So
no worries.
Yes,
So
I think it is a good start.
So Amanda,
Yes.
years ago, there was a bill passed that allowed for, well, basically insisted that employers had to let parents off for school meetings, but that's not necessarily paid time. Not all of us are lucky enough to work at a place like I work at, where, you know, a couple of weeks ago when I had to take care of one of my adult children's mental health crisis, I was allowed paid time off to deal with that. But having said that, we still have, you know, issues with families feeling able to utilize the law to let them off. So if this bill were to pass, we would just need to make sure there's a lot of education out in the community for families so that they know that this is required.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point, Shar, which is not everybody reads NRS. As a matter of fact, most people don't. So the next step after passage, and whenever it goes into effect, I don't recall when that one would go into effect, is sort of the public education about what their opportunities are there. So, you know, we sort of focus on these 4 months, but I think Senator Neal highlighted how much work is done after a bill is actually passed, including sometimes development of regulations. That can be another year or so, even longer in some cases, before the actual details of how a bill is going to be implemented are put into place. So it's not just about watching these 4 months. It's about hanging in there for the long term in some cases for your bill. So I know we focus on the legislative session, but there's way more to it, really.
Mm-hmm. It is, and that's great ways for people to stay involved, because I know many of the organizations, that's what they focus on doing, is following up on those and making sure that they get enacted. And unfortunately, sometimes there's bills that I'm following from 4 years ago that they're still not following the law, which is why it's important to look at, not that we want to focus on penalties, but if there are no penalties or no action, then sometimes there's not incentive to follow it. Or with these unfunded mandates, it makes it very hard for people to have those resources to be able to follow the bill too, and understanding where to get those from.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a great point about the fiscal impact of some of the bills, but certainly holding the law accountable for what was passed, really. And whether that's, going back to legislators and saying, hey, we really appreciated what you did here, Senator Sponsor, but we're finding in the community that this is not, not bearing the results that you expected. Maybe it needs to be tweaked. And then we find, having patience is really, really important. And it's very rare that that a law gets passed just amazingly well the first time. And also a lot of the laws that we're seeing now that are being passed this session, and I think of things like presumptive eligibility, actually started many years ago. And it's a long journey to collect the data, to get the stakeholders together. And I mean, my group has worked on bills, for years, just getting to the point where you've got that right alignment of, having the data, having the state agency agree, working through stakeholders that, had concerns, and just bringing a group to the table that says, we're ready to move forward, can take years. Don't underestimate the, having to put a lot of effort into something, and convincing other people why something needs to be done.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully some of our next steps will be requiring everybody to offer paid leave for things like maternity. And we'll get there.
Well, it is building blocks, Amanda, for sure. And I think we heard from Assemblywoman Gorlow and others just how important it is to have the women representation at the legislature, because it's really focused on things that we never focused on before, including, motherhood, raising children, doing that while you're a professional, the challenges of being a single parent, all those things are coming up now and more. So it's really, it's nice that the focus has changed a little bit in that regard, and that women are driving this at the legislature as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about through the pandemic how women-led countries really navigated the pandemic well. And so I was thinking we're in good hands with our legislature here in Nevada. And it's the same thing to see these things that are coming up or a shift. And I think it's so important because we know that, women have lost their jobs at twice the rate of men and spent 3 times the amount on, domestic work and unpaid care and things like that. So this is so crucial to support the women. And by doing so, it supports the whole community and our families. So it's really kind of a beautiful thing to see. And to have all week these women come on that are, unapologetic about their role and what they're doing. So much gratitude, and like I said, faith in where our state is and where we're going. It's a good thing to see.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so we're gonna move on. We'll run over some of the tips for advocacy, and I want to see. Let me stop sharing for just a moment to see who is. I'm just curious too if there's anybody. I think everybody on the call. Is there anybody who hasn't been here the past couple days? Okay, because I was wondering too, Jeanette, that maybe we could talk about a little bit too, just going forward to like how we keep advocating, not just this week, but to make sure that we're sustaining efforts all throughout the session to make sure we keep a focus on kids, and that some of the methods that we can just touch on again that you can do every day.
Right, absolutely. And thank you so much, Amanda. And I thought I'd start with a little quiz. And I don't know if anybody's open to answering, but Amanda showed this morning that there was a bill hearing that started at 8 o'clock, and you're sitting, someone's just texted you, oh my gosh, this bill, it's great. What can you do at 10 after 8 to tune into a hearing that started 10 minutes ago about a bill that you've just found out about? So from the folks that have been on the call for the last few days, any takers on that question? Everybody's really shy on a Friday morning. Jane?
Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube because you can back it up.
Exactly. Go to YouTube, go to the legislative channel. You can watch it later. You can back it up to the beginning and see if they started with another bill rather than your bill. So YouTube is an excellent place, and tune into the YouTube channel. Jane, you get a gold star for your Friday, extra cup of coffee or whatever your beverage is. There you go. Another option is to voice your opinion about that bill. So there are places you can go to the legislative website to submit your opinion. You could do that now when we were done and submit your opinion. You select the bill off the agenda. And then you hit your for or against, and a few words go a long way to explaining. So you don't have to be always super prepared this legislative session. You can just sort of jump in, especially when one of your colleagues calls and says, please pay attention to this bill, and here's why. So don't feel like you've sort of missed the boat if you haven't written testimony or haven't submitted something in writing or aren't prepared to actually say a few words about a bill. There are options, and I think this legislative session, there's really some great options. So how to keep working on your bill. We are, I forget what week we're in right now, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. And the legislature runs through May 31st. So we've just started in a lot of ways. Monday is a deadline. The following Monday is a deadline. So there's lots more bills that are going to be coming out that you'll want to be looking at, even past Children's Week. And NICRP has a great bill tracker, and they have a multitude of bills and a multitude of categories. I love how they categorize them. To be able to just click on their link that's in there to check out the bill. But for the bills that you already have that you're very interested in, please remember that there's several steps that a bill goes through in its journey to the governor's office, where hopefully he will sign it. And that is, first there needs to be a hearing. And many bills have already had hearings. Many bills have not had hearings yet. So make sure that you know when the hearings are. The hearing is just an opportunity for the proponents and opponents, those that are neutral, to make their case in front of the committee. about the bill, why they like it, why they don't, what needs to be amended. Then the bill gets to rest. Even if it's a bill that people are enthusiastic about on the committee, they generally don't move a bill, and that's sort of legislative lingo, until another day. In the end, when things are, when there's crunch time, they may move bills on the same day. But right now, your bill would have to be scheduled for what's called a work session. So you'll want to make sure to look for that second day when it's either it says work session or a little parentheses with a WS. And that is when your bill is going to be considered by the committee. I would frankly submit a supporting letter at that point again, because, although legislators do go back to the original hearing day and look for the exhibits that day, it can't hurt to throw it out there in front of them again. So when the bill's on work session, you can submit something. Generally, there is no more testimony taken when a bill is on work session. So your opportunity to have advocated for that bill was at the hearing. The work session is for staff to look to present what's called a work session document. It sort of summarizes briefly what the bill does. It talks about briefly who may have been in opposition or in favor of the bill. And then if there's any amendments that are being considered, and you have to remember amendments are super important because they're going to change that original version of your bill into potentially an amended version. So make sure that you look at the amendment that's being proposed on the bill, make sure that you understand it and how it fits into what you wanted that bill to do. Sometimes they're right on target. You were involved in the group that put it together because the bill sponsor, you reached out to them and said, hey, this is something we'd like to see changed. Sometimes other people have been working on the bill, and now all of a sudden there might be an unintended consequence for what you feel is important. So you'll want to make sure that you understand that work session document, and if there's an amendment, and the committee feels that they like the amendment, someone will make a motion for what's called amend, do, pass. And amend, do, pass means that that bill is going to be amended with whatever they put in their motion to move forward in the process. And this is done completely at the committee level. Some committees are as small as 5 people. Depending, some are much larger than that in the assembly. But in order to move that bill out of committee, a majority of legislators on that committee have to vote for that amendment. I have seen amendments fail. Generally, what happens is sponsors like to get their ducks in a row beforehand so that they understand those any objections and have worked all of that out. So that's step 2 in the journey of your bill. It's now come out of a committee. It's been amended. Maybe it wasn't amended. If it wasn't amended, it probably has a little simpler journey timing wise. That's called a do pass bill, not an amend do pass bill. And now it's going to go to the either the Senate floor or the Assembly floor, depending on where that bill started. At that point, the Legislative Council Bureau will formally write up that amendment, and it will look like the bill. And on the floor of either the Senate or the Assembly, there will be a motion to amend that bill with the amendment, and they're given numbers. And now there's a motion on the floor of the Senate or Assembly to amend the bill. And now it's actually going to get reprinted. So there will be a first reprint of your bill. So if your bill is AB 123, now there's going to be an R1, which is revision 1. And that is actually going to describe the entire new bill. So you'll see it all in one place, what it looks like. Make sure to look at the bill at that point, because now that it's all together, it's going to it's, you know, it's going to flow, and you want to make sure that it flows the way you want it to. At that point, the legislature, either the Assembly or the Senate, will vote on that bill. So not on the original bill, but the R1 version of that bill. And they're going to put it, you know, there's a big board in the Senate and the Assembly. They're actually going to put the bill number up there. They're going to put that brief description of what it does. And then they're going to open the floor to the vote. And you'll see the little red and green, the names change to red and green. Someone might abstain for some reason. So you'll see the vote. And then it'll indicate at the top whether it's passed or failed. Remember that many bills only require a simple majority. Just one more than half of the body. So in the case of the Assembly, there's 42 members. So you need 22 for a simple majority. So at least 22 people have to vote for your bill in the Assembly. Or some bills, because they change revenue, maybe have a fee in it, change a tax, those bills require a 2/3 majority, and it will indicate on the board whether you've reached the 2/3 majority threshold and whether the bill passed or failed. That's only half of the journey, because now that entire process is going to be completed again on the other side of what they call the building. So if it was an Assembly bill and it just passed out of the Assembly, now it's going to go to the Senate. Remembering that if it was amended, now that new version is going to go over to the other side. So if it was passed as amended, now when you make your presentation on the bill, you're going to have to incorporate whatever those amendments are into your presentation. So it might be slightly different. It might change the effective date. It maybe change the age of young kids that the bill applied to. You just want to make sure to relook at your presentation and make sure that it's accommodated whatever the new portions of that bill are. And as advocates, you want to make sure that legislators understand, you know, what that looks like. And it goes to another committee, it's heard, you'll have the opportunity to make your comments at that committee hearing again on the first revision. And then the bill will go to work session again. It'll be considered by the committee. You have to get at least a majority to get it out of that committee. They might amend it again. You know, they might say, wow, you know, this is good, but we'd really like to see it slightly different. So if that happens, then it goes to the either the Assembly or Senate floor. It's considered. If it has a new amendment and it's passed, you'll actually have a second version of your bill. So AB 123 R2 that will move forward through the process. After that, it gets a little complicated because now the Senate has passed a bill that was different than what the Assembly did, and they have to come together to resolve that difference. The new chamber might say, wow, Assembly, you did a great job. You actually made this bill better. And then it just moves forward. Or they might say, we still have to, we have some differences. We need to resolve those, and it'll go through a resolution process. But the important thing is to know is that there are many steps along the way. And just because you've presented it once doesn't mean you're not going to be required to do that again, because hopefully your bill will get through that process. And if both houses pass your bill, resolve those differences, it's going to be on its way to the governor. And often the governor, I don't know, how virtual will be in June, or probably early June. But there's usually bill signings. So if you were an integral part of a bill, you might be able to be there in the governor's office and watch him sign the bill and get a nice photo to mark your hard work. So I see that there's a great graphic. I don't know where that's from, Amanda, but I can tell I already like it because I love graphics. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know where that came from, or is it something you all put together?
I don't remember where we got it from. We've been using it for a long time, but we have it's from our advocacy training.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, I like that. I might ask you for that because we always look for tools that help people to understand better. And just a reminder that we have a graphic in our that we prepared for our use and our clients and anybody who wants it. And Amanda will put that graphic in about how to participate in the legislative session. I see a couple of points in the chat. Awesome, 81 days left. So now we know. We usually try to have a halfway party. So I don't know how we're going to be able to do that, but it's our 60th day party for our team because we've made it halfway through, although I don't think half of the work is done at that point, but it's a nice way to mark things. And then let's see. Yeah. I also saw here it is. Thank you so much, Amanda. You're reading my mind. This is the legislative calendar. So I mentioned the April 9th deadline when your bill has to be out of the first house. The first committee in the first house. April 20th, it has to be out of the first house. So if it's AB 123, it has to be out of the assembly. If it's SB 123, out of the Senate. Then it goes to the other side with that entire committee process again. It has to be out of the second committee by May 14th, the second house by May 21st. All bills passed. Oh, right. Good point. So all bills that are passed that don't have a date at the end of when they become effective are effective on October 1. To not have that as the effective date, you actually have to specify an effective date in the bill. Some are as early as July 1 of the year. So July 2021, many bills are implemented past that because it takes a while for people to go through whatever administrative process, reg process, whatever that might be. And they might be, for example, January 1, 2022, as an example. But if they don't say it, then it's October 1 of that same year.
So Maris asked if she could show this slide. I think it's one of her favorites, but we like to show this in our training to let people know ahead of time that it's going to be a frustrating process and not to give up hope.
Yes, I love that slide. I love that slide.
So sometimes we go through steps in the process, but it'll take us a while to get our tire swing. But if we keep fighting for it, then we will make it better and better each time. And, you know, I know Jeanette was saying that, you know, sometimes it can take years to pass a bill, and we do a lot of work in the early childhood education and remind people it took 22 years of fighting to get full day kindergarten. And there's still, you know, and even after it passed, it took a while to implement because they didn't have the infrastructure and the teachers and it, you know, so it's, it can take some time, but if people wouldn't have stayed with it, then we wouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this slide because especially that little stump there on the bottom, what the budget allowed. We've seen that plenty of times where a great bill gets passed, but it says to the extent funding is available or something like that. And then you go, wow, there's no money in the bank. Sorry, we've got a great idea, but it hasn't gone anywhere. I've had bills that were passed probably in the early 2000s that still haven't been implemented because there's no money available. So, but at least the structure's there in case, right? I also wanted to mention a little bit, and thank you, Dr. Tyler Garner, about what happens in the interim. So your bills are passed. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in the interim. First of all, we talked about the legislative implementation date of a bill, but we also have a number of committees that meet in the interim. between legislative sessions. Some of them are standing committees, which means they meet every year, every interim, excuse me. They usually start, we've seen it slip a little, but usually in the fall/winter of the year that you're in. So they'll start in September, November maybe of 2021. Those are things like the interim committee on healthcare. So for example, they are the ones who recommended some of the bill drafts that are being heard this legislative session, including they had their own presumptive eligibility, plus Assemblywoman Gorlow. They looked at the continuous eligibility for kids, the 12 months. So a lot of work is done in the interim between legislative sessions, and you'll want to certainly follow those agendas and potentially suggest topics for those committees to look at. So I can't recall who it was. Dina mentioned, Senator Neal mentioned this morning about her dental bill. That's an example of something that the Health Committee might look at, and it helps to shine light on the issue that you want in the health arena, for example. There's also the interim committee on juvenile justice as an example. So there will be places where you can participate and testify in the interim and provide information about topics that are important to you. Some bills require a regulation to be adopted. And they will have the force of law. So you'll want to make sure to keep track of those. And a regulation, they're started by departments usually, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Welfare, Department of the Aging or Children, DCFS. And they will introduce a regulation, sometimes because it was required by a law and sometimes because they want to clarify things. But they provide greater detail around a bill that was passed. We don't always do a lot of the finer points in a bill, and it might be sort of passed off to the regulatory process in the state of Nevada to get those details accomplished. That's a very formal process, and there are several times where you can participate in it. There are workshops around a regulation that start things off, and then ultimately a hearing. So there's at least 2 bites at the apple there. Sometimes agencies actually have more hearings or, actually workshops or hearings around a bill, a regulation, especially if it was, controversial or there were lots of objections raised at the first workshop. They will work very hard to try to get some consensus around that. And that's not the last stop either, because once the regulation has gotten to a certain point in the process, it's forwarded to a large group called the Legislative Commission. Legislative Commission is entirely made up of legislators. It's a very large group of something like 18 to 20, which is a large group. And they ultimately review regulations and decide whether they're going to be implemented or not. You can certainly provide information at that point as well. And I have seen regulations be sort of rejected in the sense that they're sent back to the agency because objections were raised, and the legislators were convinced that perhaps they need to, the agency needs to look at it again. If it does pass through the Legislative Commission, then it's sent over to the Secretary of State. It becomes effective and has the force of law. So you won't want to neglect that process at all, because it is very important to the development of how your bill will ultimately get implemented. Amanda, do you want me to? I saw you brought up a great slide. I'm happy to turn it over to you or to keep going. Lobbyists talk a lot.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, we were just pulling up some of the other, the tips as you're going through some of the logistic parts to remind people to connect, to stay involved with their coalitions and to keep using social media, before and after to keep bringing issues to the attention of policymakers and also the public. So that way, sometimes when people see that you're involved and you bring up issues, if they haven't been involved before, they may get excited and may decide, and we may have new advocates who are talking to other families or other policymakers about the issue. So it's a great way to grow our grassroots efforts to fight for the issues to make things better in Nevada.
I agree wholeheartedly, and coalitions are very, very important, and not even the coalitions that you might be working on. I use that word in a couple of different ways. You might have a coalition that comes together just for the purposes of passing a bill, because you've realized that, oh, this might affect so-and-so over here. Let me give them a call and see how they feel about it. We get calls all the time from fellow lobbyists, usually, hey, this is our bill. We just wanted to make sure that you're aware of it. If you could support it, that would be awesome. So they're in the process of coalition building around their bill. And you might not, on one bill, you might be part of a coalition, and on the other one, you might say, well, it might be improved if it was a little bit different. We got contacted by a legislator last evening about his bill that was introduced yesterday, that he wanted to make sure that CAA knew about a section of his bill. And so sometimes we even get notified by legislators because they want Children's Advocacy Alliance to look it over, make sure it looks good to them, and hopefully, in their view, to support it ultimately, either by testimony or a letter. The power of coalitions is great, and getting folks together. And you may want to think about sending out a social media post this week, tagging the 4 legislators we had join us in the mornings. They all have Twitter handles, and just thanking them for participating in the coffee chat, I think would be a lovely way to acknowledge the extra time that they got either up or weren't working between 7:30 and 8. So that might be another great thing to do.
And that one, Amaris, if you can go back to the picture, and we can bring it up, I think, on the other slide too, of Children's Week. No, one more, you just had it, this one. So you can see that this is in the top right corner, that's our room 3100 that we try to decorate. And so when legislators are coming by, a lot of people don't do it quite to the extent that we do. I think that's one of the things I pride ourselves on is is that we plaster the room with artwork. That way it really draws the attention of people when they're walking by the room and they want to go in and see what's going on. And all of those are little paper dolls that we use as a way to advocate for every child's right to a quality early childhood education. And those are made from kids in early childhood education programs all around the state. And it just fills the room. And we have boxes of those that we use to send out to legislators and to and a lot of them have messages on there from the kids and from the families about what they love about school and their programming and what they want from their policymakers.
I just wanted to let you know I already used Isabel's video from earlier this week. She was the lovely young lady who had the sunflower underneath her jacket and talked about mental health. My group also represents the Nevada Psychiatric Association. And so at the end of their meeting last night, which was probably 8:30 or so, I just felt like this is the great time to add a video about what we have to look forward to with our young people. And I tell you, it ended on such a high note. They were just so impressed with her. So I'm going to be using those videos.
So we can take a little bit of a break. I think we've given you a lot to think about this morning. Thank you, Jeanette, for that great overview of some of the details in the process that